Well, it's 11:45 in the morning, so we're going to go ahead and start our Drive-By MBA webinar. Welcome, everybody. I can tell from the participant list that a number of you are repeats, so it's good to see you again. Our topic today is how to help employees manage stress and navigate change. And that's always a challenge that we have as leaders, yet it's particularly acute this year for obvious reasons. So it is a great topic for us. Now, we will be going through our rules of the road very quickly, and then we'll dive right into our topic. I wanted to highlight for everybody that we'll spend about 15 minutes on the content. We're going to give it to you fast and furiously. And then we'll move into our Q&A. Yet before we move into our Q&A, I'm going to ask a polling question for you to prioritize our topics that we have under consideration as we continue this series beyond the original 6 that are scheduled. So I'd love it if you all can hang on just to answer that polling question. And you also have the wherewithal to tell us what other topics you'd like to hear from us. So that's different from our first 2 webinars. So let's go ahead and get started with the rules of the road. My name is Cassie Hogue. I'm a senior consultant at MAP. And I will be joined in the Q&A session of this webinar with my colleague, Michael Pizzell, who's an executive consultant and on our board of directors. We will be answering the questions that you pose as well as your association president, Albert. Good to see everybody. Relative to technology, Zoom is pretty simple to use. It's a good idea to always keep yourself on mute until we get to the Q&A portion of the webinar. If you'd like to interact with me and with Michael and with Albert, you're welcome to take yourself off mute. Other than that, keep yourself on mute so we can avoid any background noise. Also, use the chat button. Anytime you have a question, go ahead and click on chat, type in your question at any time, and then we will address those questions in the order that they're typed into chat during the Q&A portion of the webinar. We will be doing a poll. We'll be doing a poll relative to our topic, 2 questions I'll be posing at that time, as well as after we get through the topic, we give you your big idea, your key takeaway, and your tips. Then we want your input relative to future Drive-By MBA webinars. I'll go right into the content, the big idea, the key takeaway, then share 3 tips associated with that takeaway that are practical application of the big idea, future topics as I've already previewed, and then Q&A. So here's what this is all about. It's about stress and managing change. And I have 2 questions that I'll put up in a poll for you momentarily. For those of you who are new, please put yourselves on mute. That would be helpful. So the 2 questions are right here. And as you're digesting those, let me go ahead and put up your poll so you can see it online and answer it. Okay, you should be able to see it now. So here's the first question. As a result of working conditions during the pandemic, how stressed out do you think your employees are or your team members? How stressed out do you think they are? So read your options and choose one. Okay, got a number of people already weighed in here. So you got 6 options. Choose the one that best describes your team or your employees. Okay, we're getting some critical mass now. So I'll give it another 30 seconds, everybody. Go ahead and answer the polling question. I know several of you just joined in. So go ahead and see if you can answer the polling question. And in the next 16 seconds, I'll go ahead and end the poll. Looks like we're in pretty good shape. We're getting a few more votes are coming in. 5 more seconds, folks. Okay, so I can see you're weighing in on the second question already. How much change have your employees had to accept, navigate, and adopt as a result of the pandemic? Looks like everybody's been answering both questions, so that's terrific. In case you've been on the first question for a while, I'll give you another 5 seconds to weigh in.
Hey, what?
So let's mute ourselves, everybody. I'm gonna go ahead and mute all. So that there's very little feedback. Okay, let's end the poll and see what we got. So for question number 1, I'll share the results with all of you. For question number 1, the most prevalent answer, we have 5 of you saying most are doing well, some are struggling, and 5 of you saying that they have their ups and downs, they're doing okay. So we got kind of the middle of the road. That's to be expected. This is terrific. 4 of you said that they're doing well, they're very resilient. And then we have, a couple here. It's good news that we're out of this last option. Frankly, they're a mess, completely stressed out. If I had asked this question early in the pandemic, I venture to say some people might be down there. So here's where we are. Some struggling, they're doing they have their ups and downs. So that's important to note. Then let's see where there's commonality in the second question about change. Lots of changes. We're getting better as we go. Well, that's encouraging too. And that should be, what we expect at this point in the pandemic is change is here to stay, right? It's here to stay. So it's good news that we're getting better as we go. And hopefully between the takeaway and the tips, you'll have even more ammo to get even better. All right, let's go on to the what? The big idea, the key takeaway. And here's what we've got. The key takeaway is this. In order to better help your employees manage stress and better help them navigate change, you should identify strategies to do just that. And further, you need to put them in some form of a plan or a playbook. That's really important, and that's proven to be very successful through considerable body of research that's been conducted, especially since the pandemic started. Put them in a plan or a playbook. And also, they need to be written into any policies or procedures, instruction manuals. If you're writing talking points or you're messaging through email blasts and other methodologies, you need to include strategies to manage stress or navigate change. You just need to come up with them. So that's the big takeaway. They need to be in a plan somewhere, somehow. Now, it's important to also note that a plan can come in any form, from a long-range 20 to 30-page version to a 1-page outline, a micro plan, if you will. So plans come in many different stripes, and we can include our strategies in the plans in whatever form they're in. Yet, researchers have said that particularly during the pandemic, they're lacking some of these human elements. And you can see what the human elements are. This is actually true all the time, yet it's even more acute during the pandemic. Help them understand the purpose. Why are we doing this? Why are we making these changes? Why do we have all these new protocols? Why? We need to help them understand the purpose of the change or the direction or the decision, as well as help them find their purpose so they can sign up to it. Obviously, we need to help them overcome barriers that might be psychological or behavioral in nature, like an ego hit or just a resistance to change. It's natural for people to resist change, and so we need to appreciate that. And then figuring out how to make it a habit for them. The sooner the better, right? This fourth bullet point about preserving standards. Any aspect of your business that can survive the change should amplify that, because that helps people accept what is different. So certainly you probably have standards relative to your expectations of your people and of other stakeholders. And so do reinforce those. That gives people some comfort. Do find who your advocates are internally, make them champions, and remember to consider the pace. It's really hard for people to change on a dime. During the pandemic, we had to do that. Yet we need to appreciate that that's monumental. That's a monumental shift. And so it takes extra effort on our part. So here's the why. Why should we do this? Why should we identify these strategies about managing stress and navigating change and put them in a plan? Well, here's why. When we do it and people see it or hear it, they really appreciate that we even thought about these things. They truly appreciate it. So do realize that just by writing it in and saying it, you get an advantage. Also, when you do it, people will lean forward. They'll be more likely to listen and be open-minded about the plan or the change. They will be ready to contribute toward implementation, more ready than they ordinarily would be if you have specific strategies about stress, specific strategies about managing change. And best of all, you're more likely to stay on timeline, and the goals in your plan are more likely to be achieved. And the research says that 50% more likely. So this is profound, 50% more likely. Okay. So that's the why. Let's go to your tips. And there are 3 of them, as we have with each of our Drive-By MBA webinars. So the first one is know the effects. And what we mean by this is find out how your people will be affected by the decision or by the change in policy, procedure, protocol, safety, what have you. Find out how it will affect them, okay? And these are some bullet points that will help you do that. Generally, we should avoid assumptions because it is true that people are affected differently. It's individualized, so we need to appreciate that. One best practice is to survey them with just a basic survey, just a few questions about how they're feeling relative to their own well-being, as well as what they think about the change. And you should do those surveys repeatedly, maybe every month or every month and a half for a 3 instance to 6 instance timeline. So you can understand whether they're feeling less stress or more stress, or they're accepting the change or rejecting the change. So surveys are a best practice. Also consider offering no cost or low cost benefits to your employees or to your team to help them get their heads straight. And there's many great ideas that have come from the pandemic relative to no cost or low cost benefits. And then we talked about this in prior webinars. Do build some stress relief measures into meetings, ask them how they're feeling, have 5 minutes dedicated to their personal well-being. That helps a lot. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to amplify your compassion. Again, for some people who are straight shooters and direct and admired for that, some leaders who fall in that category, this can be kind of foreign, yet it's vitally important. And the research says we need to look, listen, feel, and respond. So looking means, in addition to the words people are saying or beyond the words they're saying, watch their body language, watch their posture, watch their eye contact. That's going to tell you a lot more about how they're enduring stress than the words that they say. So use your powers of observation. Your instincts will be accurate if you observe. Also, be sure to listen, truly listen to them. Make time for them to open up to you. You need some patience to do that, but you want them to open up to you about how they're feeling, what their emotional state is, their mental, their physical well-being. So you want to hear that, and you want to hear it without judgment. You just want to listen to them. You should, whenever someone expresses a negative emotion, okay, you should acknowledge it. Say, I hear you, and I understand why you feel that way. And whatever other words are helpful, acknowledge it rather than brush it under the rug. And then respond. And what this means is that we need to sometimes give ourselves thinking time to decide how to follow up on a matter or answer a question in a way that is practical, yet also human and kind. So it's quite okay to say, I'll get back to you on that. It's just vitally important that you do, and you do so in a way that's practical, yet also kind. So that's how we amplify compassion. Let's go on to our third tip, and it is to measure and incentivize. And what this means specifically, and this is true for change management, whether we're in a pandemic or not, it's just more true during these remarkably difficult conditions. And what we need to do is identify those small steps, just jot them down, record them somewhere, and anytime your team progresses, celebrate, congratulate them, acknowledge them, recognize them. And then keep reinforcing, particularly what's in it for them. We're doing this because it will benefit these stakeholders and you as well. And then identify the early adopters. Those people can influence others and give them a role in affecting the change. Reward those who do honor your standards. As I mentioned before, that's really important with a significant change, is to protect the standards that are at the core of your company or your team, and the team's success. Reward people for doing what's right all the time through the change, and then use a visual, a thermometer or something like the background of our slide, so people can see how they're doing. All right, let's summarize. Here it is. Your key takeaway is to identify and bake strategies for managing stress and navigating change into your plans and your playbook. Those plans can come in any form. Know the effects that people will manifest. You got to ask them in some way, shape, or form. Amplify your compassion, and do measure progress and reward people as you go. All right, so what I'm going to do next is bring up the poll, and I would like you to look at our list of topics that have been proposed beyond our 6 Drive-By MBA webinar series. Beyond the 6 that we already have calendared, what would you be most interested in? If in the list that I show you, there is a topic that you'd love to learn more about, then go into chat and make that suggestion. So let me go ahead and open the poll. Let's see if I can find it. All right, folks, let's see. Maybe if I do it this way, you can see the results. I'm sorry, we're having technical difficulties and I'm unable to bring up the second poll. And so we'll forgo that for now. And instead, we'll go to our Q&A. And I will open up my chat box and see what kind of questions we have. And of course, if you have a question, go ahead and put it in chat. So let's see what we got here. I see there are 3 questions in here. And the first one is this. It's, when we make a procedural change, what are some good ways to habitualize that change? Well, that's a good question, because that's the hard work, right? Is habitualizing change. I can say off the top of my head that getting people involved early in the decision, maybe if you can, do it while you're making the decision. Yet if you have made the decision, then get some key influencers at least involved early to ask them how they think it can best be implemented. So get them involved early. That helps accelerate the habitualization. That's one way. Another way to do it is to provide lots of reminders and to in some way recognize or reward those who do start making the change. Lots of reminders. In fact, I think I've shared this in a prior webinar. It is true that as leaders, we often need to remind people 9 times before they're able to habitualize a change. So be patient when you give them the reminders, and also be friendly and positive and supportive rather than punitive. You know, if you don't do this, then we're in big trouble. It's appropriate to share the negative consequences, yet when you remind them, you want to be supportive. Do serve as a role model, or ask others to provide examples and role model the behaviors you want. That will help. Okay, let's go to our second question here. And it has to do with, I'm gonna pick up my notes because I'm reading the question and I have some answers here. What are some no-cost benefits that we could consider to reduce stress? Yeah, that's a good question too. By the way, you can Google that question and get some really imaginative answers. From my clients, what I've heard is ask for employees to volunteer to lead little sessions during breaks, stretching maybe, or a micro workout. You'd be surprised. Often employees would be happy to do that and volunteer to do that during breaks. That's one thing that I've heard that's been surprisingly effective. Also, have some team check-ins just to talk about personal matters. Avoid the business matters, or at least for the first 5 or 10 minutes of that check-in, and just talk about personal matters. That helps. Do have informal get-togethers, more of them than you ordinarily would. Of course, you need to find an open air location where you can be socially distanced, yet those do help when people can physically get together. Lunchtime, coffee, before work, post work. And then another no-cost method is to, have people volunteer to bring in food for breaks. Food has a remarkably soothing impact on people. So food donations for breaks or lunches are a good way to provide a no-cost benefit. Okay, I've got one more question, then we'll open it up to all of you and my colleagues as well. How do we make a strategy out of tip number 2, which is amplifying compassion? Well, there's different ways to do it. One might be to schedule and hold listening sessions. That's a strategy. You can even measure your progress versus that. Train supervisors on active listening. There's another strategy. You could also have your supervisors report weekly on the nonverbal cues that they're observing, something like that. All right, I'll open it up first to both Michael and Albert relative to the 3 questions that I just answered. What additionally are your observations? Michael, why don't you go first?
Well, one of the things you mentioned reminds me of experiences I've had in the past where you're in stressful situations. I don't have to get into the stress. This is a previous career. But we had people just stand up and look out a window, to just kind of break their concentration. And oftentimes, because of the building I was in, it was easy to do. You don't always have windows, but the idea was to kind of look far away and just kind of relieve the mind. And it kind of gets into what you were talking about, Cassie, in terms of kind of breaking up the routine. It doesn't have to be that, be just something to get people to kind of relieve that stress, the pressure that you're feeling, by just doing something very different.
Okay, helpful. So Albert, your thoughts relative to those 3 questions?
Yeah, we always have the question of the guys in the field. You're running a crew of, say, 30 or 40 guys and girls, and it's a rough and tough bunch, and it's not a big thing to share feelings and have all that touchy-feely, talky stuff. What's a good time to start doing this? I mean, how do you implement something like this to a crew of very strong individuals? Any suggestions?
Well, I can answer that, and I welcome those of you who have thoughts in response to that as well to come off mute and also provide an answer. Where I've seen it work, especially where it's a real style shift for a leader, a supervisor, a manager to do that, is pretty much to start with, what is, by saying, look, this will be the first time you've ever heard something like this from me. And frankly, it feels a little, uncomfortable for me, yet I think it's important that we give it a try. So let's just talk about these things. That has been very effective because it makes you as the lead, as the supervisor, as the manager, it makes you real. It makes you, this is an overused word, yet it makes you vulnerable in a good way. And you'll find that people open up to you when you just tell it like it is to begin with, rather than, say, hey, we're all going to do stretching exercises, or we're all going to stand up and look out the window, or we're all going to face and watch the sunset. Instead, start with, this is kind of uncomfortable for me because I've never done this before. Yet, we got to be supportive of each other in new ways. So let's give it a try. Mm-hmm. Anybody else have a thought there to answer Albert? Anybody else? Okay, we do have time for another question or two. Go ahead and pull yourself off mute or type it in the chat real quick. And we will listen and respond. Okay, as you're thinking, let me encourage you to also type into chat your suggestions for other topics. What do you really want to hear about? And in addition to that, as we have with our prior two webinars, we'll go ahead and distribute to you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. So you'll have it, as well as a quick glance tip sheet. So you'll have a one-pager as well as the entire PowerPoint presentation. So that's a benefit. We do now have another good question in chat, and it's, how do you suggest that we help them with mental needs specifically? Yeah, so you ask people to open up, maybe you have more one-on-ones, and somebody says, I'm suffering from what I believe is acute depression or anxiety, and I'm just at my wit's end and I don't know what to do. That requires your action. If you work in any way with an HR professional, either in your company or through your payroll processors all provide guidance in this matter, then I strongly would suggest you get a hold of that person, talk through the matter with them, and they will point you to some resources you can suggest to the individual. Michael or Albert, how would you answer that question?
If you hear something or see something, say something. I think that's the biggest thing. Somebody may just make a comment that could be offhand, but they're really reaching out. I'd say something. Ask them if they're okay. Do a wellness check. Are you okay? Are you feeling, are you feeling bad? And if you can't help them, say, I'm going to find you a place to call, or give them your phone and say, let's go call somebody. I know all of these workers have insurance programs, and it's a very big item. You can call your insurance carrier, and there's somebody there to help immediately. So yeah, that's my biggest thing. Say something.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Put it back in their lap and ask them what you can do to help, rather than presume what to do. Would get their feedback and hopefully get them to open up.
That'll help too. And then lastly, this question just popped up in chat. How do we ask them about family matters? Because many of the stressors have to do with what's going on at home. I mean, you know, we've been quarantining with children, you know, they're in hybrid school or they're home all the time with online school, and it's very stressful. Maybe a spouse or significant other has been furloughed or laid off. Very, very stressful. So how do we as leaders ask them? I think in a quiet moment or in a group moment, when you're just talking about personal matters, ask the question like this: how are you doing personally? Whatever you're comfortable sharing with us, I think we'll all be able to identify with it and support you. So how are you doing personally? And then it's up to them. I have found, and I facilitate a lot of meetings with a lot of clients. I have found that when you ask it that way, you're surprised at how much they share with you and how touching it is and how it brings the team together to hear these kinds of problems that we all can identify with. Okay, everybody, we've come to the end of these drive-by MBA webinars. We go fast and furious, as I said, so I'll wrap it up. Feel free to reach out to the association or to me directly or my colleague Michael with any questions. You do have our email addresses and our phone numbers here in our last slide, and I'll end with the quote. The quote comes from a woman who is an organizational development specialist and a psychologist and an author. She says the best antidote to stress is resilience, having the ability to respond to change or adversity proactively and resourcefully. And proactively means develop strategies and put them in a plan and implement them. Okay, good to hear and see you all again. Remember, there's an incentive. Sign up for the next one and the one after that. Those of you who get all 6 in, you have a really good chance at winning a group coaching session from my firm MAP or his and hers Apple Watches. So that's compelling. Anyway, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.